If you live in Europe and you've been somewhat following what is happening in the job market, and not just in tech, but every job market, and it's been the introduction of the EU Pay Transparency Directive since June of this year, but maybe it's not really super clear what it actually means for you as someone either looking for a job or soon looking for a new job, or just, as like a regular person, and what the detail of this directive are actually gonna do in your day-to-day life. And to break it down very simply, this law introduces a bunch of new requirements that any job posting has to follow. The first one is that it's over with those like fake, very wide ranges of salary, but they have to give an actual real representative salary range. So you won't see like 40K to 120K, because that's basically not really giving a range at that point, but now they have to give something that is actually real, something like, 60 to 80, something that is actually indicative of the real salary behind, which I'm pretty sure is actually a fairly common practice in the US, but here in the EU, it was still very common to not display even a salary range at all, or if there was one, sometimes it was so wide that honestly didn't really matter. But now you will have a real look at the expected salary that you can get from a specific job. Another thing is that during the interview process, you can't be asked anymore about your previous salary, which used to be a very common question. I've actually been asked that questions many times while applying to jobs, but now it won't happen anymore within the EU. And that's really great, honestly, because I know for a fact that a lot of company would base the final salary that they would give you based on that answer. Obviously, it's been a known fact. I think most people always probably give a bit of a higher salary than the real one, especially if they were at a somewhat low paying job. Probably they weren't telling the actual salary because it was very known that the answer you would get from the company would be based on this. But now they can't even ask you the question, which I think is quite nice, because then we all start somewhat on the same playing field, and jobs will come with real budgets behind that won't vary a lot depending on what the previous candidate's salary was, which is good. And finally, last two things are more impact on the company side, but it's good to know as a candidate, you can actually request the average pay for your role and gender at that specific company. So again, another arm in your negotiation process for the salary. You can actually look at what other people within this company, within your role, are getting paid, and make sure you're kind of standing in the same level as them. And finally, about the gender pay gap, again, for any company with more than, 100 employees, has to report the gender pay gap within the company, and also after they pass a certain threshold. So if there's more than a 5% unexplained gap, basically, between the genders, then it automatically triggers some sort of control conducted by authorities. So that hopefully this gender pay gap will go down, and will also be something companies actively invest in and try to keep as low as possible, which I guess might now become sort of like a marketing tool. I'm sure companies with very, very low gender pay gap must use that as a way to attract high-performing employees that care about that. Especially, I'm assuming a lot of women will want to work at companies where this gender pay gap is somewhat small. So overall, it means now as a candidate, you get access to much more data than previously about salaries, which is a great tool in your negotiation, because you can have actual facts and the company can't deny you certain rights about asking those questions, which lets you now come in the salary negotiation with a bit more of data behind you, and hopefully will make everything a bit more fair. So even though this is an EU-wide directive, I would say maybe depending where you're based, there might be different applications of that directive. It's not as strict as a local law would be, and it's more things that each country has to follow and get to that point. So maybe check where you live, what is the actual application of that, but at least you have the general idea of this directive. So that's the legal part done, but what it actually means for you now. Like I said, the negotiating power, in my opinion, is kind of flipped now. You as the candidate can come in with much more data, and the company has some actual numbers that they're legally obliged to provide if you ask for. And it also means when you apply, if you're only applying to jobs starting at a certain salary, you're gonna have actual data and lose way less time applying for jobs only to find like maybe 3 interviews in that the salary is too low for your expectations. And you can already do this filtering while applying, which honestly saves everyone a bunch of time. And my hope is also that I will in some places raise the salary, because since they have to communicate it at the first step, then there is a bigger incentive for the company to have a very competitive salary. Another great thing, in my opinion, is this question about the like salary history that you have that is now banned. First of all, remember that. I think as a candidate, it's really important to know the questions that it currently asks. And that way, if it comes up in the interview, first of all, you don't have to reply to that, and you can even point that it's actually illegal. And maybe that's a bit of a red flag also, considering the company still asks those questions and they're not really up to date with the law. And I actually think it makes a lot of sense, because I think we all know the economy isn't great right now. And for instance, especially the tech market, I would say, has been very different the past few years. It used to be like a very easy market, and switching job was very easy, and now it's become a bit more tough. It takes longer time to find a job, and so it is fairly common that some people accept a lower pay because, well, they still need to pay their bills, and because the process takes now months to find a new job sometimes. So it still gives you a bit of a peace of mind if you've had to accept an offer with a bit of a lower salary than you wanted, that you will never have to divulge that salary in your next jobs, and especially in the interview process. And so you can accept this salary if it helps you pay your bills for now, but know that it won't like set the bar for the next job that you have lined up. Also, the ability to request the salaries within the company is a great way to also make sure now that the ranges that are going to be displayed are going to be somewhat aligned with what's actually happening in the company, because companies will know that you could ask for the actual data and how much other employees in the company are being paid for the same role. And so maybe you will hopefully never have to actually ask the question, and you can just trust a bit more what's being displayed. But it's still nice to have as a backup if you feel like maybe you're not sure the salary that is on the job posting is actually very realistic and what other people are getting paid for the same job. Then you can ask for proof of it and kind of have some proof behind it. So really, overall, this negotiation step of like a new job will come in. I also think this gives many new red flags that you can spot right there on the job posting of companies that maybe seem a little dodgy about all of those numbers, or maybe are not very willing to apply this transparency policy. And just from the job posting, if all of those are sort of red flags already, then you can know maybe this is not the great company you want to work at. So I think it's really nice to see as a candidate that now we are able to come in this like salary conversation with a bit more data to back us, and a bit less like in the dark of a negotiation, because at least that was my feeling up until now, because there was sort of like no legal ground. You have to just hope that the company you apply at is being a bit honest about the salary range, and you don't have to rely just on your own self-confidence about what you're worth, and sort of conducting your own like survey within people of your industry that have the same salaries. Especially, I think it really made a difference up until now to have a good network or not, because if you had a good network, then you know a lot about the numbers, how much everyone gets paid. But if you didn't, you kind of came in blind with no real data behind you, and now this data has to be provided to you. So I think it just allows everyone to be on sort of the same playing field, or at least start with a bit less of an unequal ground. So overall, as you can see, I find this a really positive thing, especially as a candidate. And I think even for companies in the long run, it's beneficial, and it's going to bring more trust on the job market, which we desperately need right now, and give back some of the power to the applicants, which is very nice in like a tough market overall. And I also think it's really important to know your rights. That's why I wanted to make this video, to kind of like plainly state what you can actually gain as a candidate with this new law, so that you don't have to like look into it, because I know that I like following what happens with the law, but I know that's not the case for everyone. And I think because I have this platform where I talk about tech in general and working in tech, it was a great opportunity for a video, and something that I'm like quite passionate to share about, and something that I'm trying in general to take the channel in this direction. And with that being said, I will see you in the next video.